Hi, everyone, and welcome to the last day of the European Blockchain Convention. We have an amazing topic ahead of us. CBDCs, hopefully we'll get some answers. Last week, we saw everyone some news coming from the Swiss National Bank. Today, we have the honor to have Thomas here to reply to the questions we may have. And also we have Francisco Maroto, who is head of blockchain at BBVA, and Hachem will do the moderation. So welcome the three of you.
Thank you, Daniel, and hello and welcome everybody. And thank you all for joining us today on this panel discussion on central bank digital currencies. I'm looking very much forward to the discussion with Francisco and Thomas. My name is Hassan. I'm a lawyer at the Danish Central Bank, and I'm really thrilled to be facilitating this discussion. I would just like to remind everyone that throughout this session, you are of course invited to ask questions by submitting them into the question panel, and we'll try to I will try to facilitate the questions to the participants. Before introducing you to the panelists, I would just like to set the stage and give you some background information on this topic. Well, a vast majority of central banks are researching and actively experimenting with central bank digital currencies. And some of these projects include Project Jura, the Swedish e-krona, mBridge, tokenized euros, and so on. But also extensive research on both wholesale and resale CBDC architecture and also cross-border arrangements. So I think it's fair to say that there's a lot of stuff going on, and not only in Europe but around the world, and this will bring us to the main topic of this discussion: is central bank digital currencies beyond borders. And lucky for us, we have our great panelists who are also a driving force behind some of these projects and research. So without further ado, I would like the panelists to introduce themselves. Thomas, would you like to start?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. So my name is Thomas Moser. I'm an alternate member of the governing board of the Swiss National Bank. I'm an economist by background, and I'm involved, as you said, in the projects that the Swiss National Bank is doing on wholesale CBDC, and then I have a private research interest in CBDC and cryptocurrencies more generally.
Perfect, thank you, Thomas. And Francisco?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be in this panel here today. I'm working in the client solution area of the bank. This is the area of the bank that is in charge of moving the bank from the traditional world to the new digital world, creating the new products and services that we need in order to compete in this new ecosystem. Within this space, I am heading the blockchain and digital asset team, and leading and defining the strategy for BBVA globally and executing the different projects that we have within the crypto and blockchain space.
Perfect, and we're grateful for both of you for taking part of this discussion and offering your thoughts and reflection on CBDCs. Well, today we'll be discussing the motivations behind a possible issuance of CBDCs, some of the ongoing projects, and finally, we'll try to ask if and when we could expect an issuance of a CBDC to actually become reality. So let's just jump right into it. And the first question is for you, Thomas. Why are central banks exploring CBDCs, both retail and wholesales? Why is this actually interesting for central banks?
No, thank you. That's a very good question that I actually get asked often. And I think the motivations differ from country to country. On the retail side, I would say the central banks, I think there it's part of the general digitalization and of the innovations that we have seen recently. Clearly, payments have been changing a lot over the last 10 years. There are new players that appeared with fintechs. And I think central banks have to figure out how they fit into this new ecosystem of payment providers. What is their role, and what are the opportunities? And I think that differs, as I said, from country to country, because the roles and also the roles that the private sector plays might be different from country to country. So that's on the retail side. And here the Swiss National Bank has been communicating that we do not see a need, at least at this stage, to provide a retail CBDC. We leave that to the private sector. On the wholesale side, I think it is the question of blockchain technology. What role will blockchains or DLTs play in the financial market infrastructure in the future? And if you have important financial market infrastructure, then it's a natural question, in what circumstances or on which infrastructure do you want to use central bank money for settlement? Because only central bank money does not have a counterparty risk. So that's a question of financial stability in the end. But there it depends how quickly blockchain technology develops, how quickly these infrastructures become important. I think that would be how I would explain it, at least from a Swiss perspective.
Thank you, Thomas. So maybe just to maybe elaborate a bit, especially on the wholesale part, is mainly about how the infrastructure is running or will be running in the future, and with what type of cash lake we want to use, and you, as you also mentioned, the systemically important participant in these systems, they should be able to use central bank money at least if we're able to provide that.
Absolutely. As you said, I mean, the question is, how do you pay on a blockchain? So you need to have some kind of a digital money. It can be provided by the private sector. It can be stable coins. But I guess in certain circumstances, especially if the infrastructure becomes systemically important, then central banks usually want central bank money to be the settlement asset.
Perfect. Thank you. And Francisco, you're not from a central bank, but from a bank's, like from a commercial bank's perspective, do you agree with the motivations behind this, and do you see any benefits of actually if central banks chose to issue CBDCs?
Yes, so elaborating on what Thomas was saying, from a bank's perspective, a commercial bank's perspective, we are always looking on how we can improve the user experience, how we can provide better services for our customers. And we think that there is always a space for improvement. And in the settlement space, or payment space, where we see that CBDC could appear, as the new kid on the block on this space, we think that it might bring some value and that it has potential to bring value. And it depends on how these solutions are built and for what they are built. Starting from the wholesale side, we see that there is improvement maybe from the traditional market infrastructure perspective, traditional settlement. Now we have, for example, in Europe, Target 2, but Target 2 is not 24 times 7 times 365. And these are the needs that we have in the new digital world. These are immediate, real-time, always working settlement system. So maybe this new CBDC system, if it's built for wholesale and is built with this in mind, could be solving problems that we have now in the traditional or existing wholesale settlement systems. Not only thinking in payments, Target 2, but also looking into the security space, Target 2 securities, where securities are settled. Maybe in that space, we can also use CBDCs and improve these services with tokenization and tokenizing financial assets or securities, and moving again to this better service, improved service, more real-time service, and open always, always open service. So that's on the traditional side. On the new world, on the tokenization world, we see that there is potential for issuance of securities or bonds in a tokenized format. Once we have the asset tokenized, or maybe real estate or other non-financial assets tokenized, we will need the cash leg, and you have been talking about it. We need the cash leg, and this cash leg can be solved via off-chain settlement, connecting to existing payment systems, or can be solved with on-chain settlement. And for this, we need a tokenized cash. And this tokenized cash can be a stablecoin, privately issued, or it could be a CBDC. CBDC could be maybe more backed by the central bank, and maybe more secure and more reliable from a banking perspective, at least. And another area of settlement that is needed is in the new blockchain ecosystems or solutions that are being built around blockchain. For example, trade finance solutions. These trade finance solutions, they need settlement. And again, we can do it off-chain, connecting with existing rails, or on-chain with tokenized cash. Again, can use stablecoins, but maybe it would be better to use a CBDC on this space. From a retail perspective, it also could bring value depending on the design and how it's built. This is a big question mark, I think, for all the central banks. At least they are in the process of defining all of this. We think it needs to bring value added for the customers and from the banks. Why? Because we already have very good real-time payment systems. For example, in Spain, we have Bizum, broadly used, cost zero, 365, 7 days a week, 24 hours working, free, and it's perfect. In UK, faster payments. In Switzerland, they also have real-time payments. So if we build a CBDC for retail use, we need to think on what it needs to bring on top of that. Maybe it's programmability for the use of IoT, machine-to-machine payments. Maybe it's conditional payments for enterprises or for the government. I don't know. We need to work on this. But it needs to add value. Otherwise, we are creating a new infrastructure with the cost is harsh for the banks and for the central bank and for everyone. And we need a business case to compensate for that new investment. So it's very important to define that business case and that value added for the users. Going back to the motivations very quickly, reducing cash would be one of them, using these CBDCs. With the problems of what we do with the persons that don't have mobile phones or don't want to work in the digital world. No? So it's a problem, so cash will always be there. Mentioning the Corona that we mentioned before, I think that one of the motivations that we have would be having an alternative payment method, because in Sweden, they don't use cash, they use a lot of cash. They had some card system outages in the past, and maybe they are willing to have another alternative to in case this happens again, you can operate in that space. Financial inclusion, maybe, I don't know. But for that, you need something more. You don't, with a wallet with some digital euros, you are not doing financial inclusion. You need to build financial services on top of that wallet with digital euros. So again, it depends on the design and what we can do with that digital euro or other currency digital. And finally, I think it's maybe more from a geostrategic perspective. We are now moving to the digital world. The markets are moving into the digital world. And if one of these CBDCs or stablecoins gains global adoption, it could be an issue for the local economy or the local digital economy of that country. No? So maybe it could be also a defensive strategy to be able to compete and operate on this new digital world with your currency, with your euro or your dollar or your yuan or your yen, no? So yeah, lots of things to discuss in the following years and a very interesting space ahead for all of us.
Thank you so much, Francisco. And it really makes sense when you're mentioning all of these different motivations and use and possible use cases, that it makes sense that there's so much research and experimentation going on. And I think that leads us on to the next question and topic, is about the ongoing initiatives and projects. We're seeing many different projects from around the world and also from the BIS Innovation Hub. And for example, we recently had the mBridge project, who are trying to create a common DLC platform for issuance of CBDC. We have Project Dunbar, but most recently we saw Project Jura. And Thomas, you have been a part of Project Jura, and I would like to, could you tell us a bit about it, and also how is Project Jura different from any of these other projects from around the world?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, we were very happy to release our report last week on Project Jura. That was a project together with the Banque de France and the consortium of private banks. And the issue was cross-border settlement of both assets and CBDC. And the projects that you mentioned have all in common that they look at how can you do cross-border settlement of different CBDCs issued by different central banks. And so I would say our project is really complementary because there are a number of questions when you do that. So a simple one would be, do you want to have all these central banks issuing their CBDC on the same platform? Or do you want to have national platforms and then connect these? And different projects look at this problem. So we have both. We have experiments with just trying interoperability, connecting different types of platforms. And then you have those where you have try to have a single platform. Now, Project Churro belongs to the second group. So we have a common platform. But what is different, I think, and new here is that we introduced together with our three some technical solutions on how could you have a common platform that is operated by a third-party private provider and still have the autonomy of the individual central banks, that they still have control over their own CBDC. And the solution, the technical solution that was involved here, on the one hand, you have sub-networks. So one question was, to which private participants do you give access to your CBDCs? And the group of banks that the Banque de France would allow access to its CBDC and the group of banks that the Swiss National Bank would allow access is a different one. So we created sub-networks on the same platform for that, so that the central banks can choose which nodes do they allow to have access to their CBDC. That's one thing. And the other thing, the really cool thing, I think, is this dual notary node. So these Corda platforms, the consensus mechanism usually works over this notary node that has to sign off all the transactions. And there, of course, you have a very important governance question. Who controls that? If you have a national platform, it's usually, a lot of times, it's the central bank that controls that notary node that has to sign off every transaction. So if you have two central banks on the same platform, the solution here was just to have two nodes, but they both, so any transaction that involves Swiss franc CBDC and the Euro CBDC would have to be signed, or has to be signed in that project, both by the Swiss National Bank and by the Banque de France. So it's a dual signatory node. I think that's new, and that has been developed specifically for that project. So I'm not saying this is the solution for everyone, but I think all these projects you mentioned, Dunbar, Enbridge, and so on, they all show you different possibilities, how you could do multiple CBDCs, cross-border settlement, and I think it's interesting to compare these solutions, see the pros and cons and all the questions it raises. And I think that one of the big findings again of this project is it's not just the technology, it's a lot of the governance questions, the legal questions, and then you have to adapt the technology in order to implement that.
Thank you so much, Thomas. And I was actually also thinking about that part, because you mentioned that this is a technical solution, but especially with cross-border payments, it's not always the technical challenges that are the hardest one. Is the governance, is the jurisdictions, KYC processes across the whole chain. So I think it's very, very interesting that is, at least from a governance perspective, that you've been trying to experiment with how can we actually try to create some governance within this platform. Thank you. And Francesco, I have a question for you. I know you've been working on some projects or trials on tokenized euros, and could you tell us a bit about that and the motivations behind those trials, and also the outcomes of these trials?
Sure, happy to do that. So we have been moving on a journey since we started 6-7 years ago with the blockchain initiatives. We started testing blockchain technology for cross-border payment settlement, and we did projects with Ripple technology to test this. Then we moved on, and we started exploring the off-chain settlement combined with operations that were being closed in the blockchain, in a blockchain ecosystem. And here we did a pilot with R3, with Corda, where we tested a a supply chain finance blockchain ecosystem that issued settlement instructions, and through an API, we connected with Swift GPI payment systems, global payment system, and with this, we were able to do off-chain settlement of blockchain-created operations or blockchain-initiated payments. No? On this same space, we collaborated with Iberpay, which is the Spanish payments clearinghouse, and we did a similar project with them. We created a blockchain ecosystem for guarantees, and when these guarantees were executed, we sent a payment initiation instruction through an API to the real-time payment system here in Spain. So we started the journey with that off-chain settlement. And then the last project we did with Iberpay, which is the Spanish payments clearinghouse, and we had the Spanish central bank as an observer of this project, so they were monitoring what we were doing. We blocked euros in the account that we have in the central bank, that the banks have in the central bank, and with these blocked euros, we issued tokenized euros on this blockchain network that we have within the Spanish entities. And we started moving these euros between the banks, and we also created wallets in a mobile phone app, and we started paying from these wallets, simulating the payments between customers, and also testing offline and online payments. So in case we didn't have internet, how we could do the payments offline. And this has helped us understand very well what would be working with a digital euro, and also helps position Iberpay in the projects looking forward to the potential issuance of a digital euro in the following years. And this is not the end of the project. We're still in conversations with Iberpay and the rest of the Spanish financial industry in order to continue this exploration and see how we can move from this basic digital euro to a more advanced or programmable digital euro, and this might be what we will do in the next or the following years. No? Apart from this, we obviously participate in different working groups regarding CBDCs. We are part of the market advisory group with the European Central Bank. We have a representative of BBVA in that group, and we are also exploring the possibility of tokenizing assets and also cash for the corporate and investment banking world.
Thank you so much, Francisco. And yeah, it sounds like you have a lot of going on, but yeah, very, very interesting. I have a question from the audience that I think would be relevant for both of you, especially now where we have a bank and a central bank represented. The question is, issuing a CBDC can downgrade the importance of retail banks as middlemen in the money flow process. What are the mitigation factors for that in order for the financial stability not to be disrupted? So I think that's mainly from a central bank perspective, but I also like your opinion on that, Francisco. After maybe you could start, Thomas.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the concerns with retail CBDC. I think one mitigating issue would be the way you distribute it. If you have a so-called hybrid system where like with cash today, where the CBDC would be distributed through the banks, then you could clearly mitigate that risk. But I can also see what Francisco actually said in the beginning. I think a lot of retail solutions in the end will just use the CBDC as a settlement between the banks, which is a wholesale CBDC. And then the banks will create their own solution for a digital token for the customers. But that's just one guess. But I think the way you distribute it is clearly a way to mitigate it.
Thank you.
Totally agree. From a bank's perspective, we are advocating for this, what they call two-tiered model. No, when you have the central bank and the commercial banks. Why? Because I think that we have the payment methods, the channels, the capabilities and the resources to do all the KYC, all the technical development, all the commercialization, all the distribution. If a central bank was willing to do all of this, they will need to grow and to build make something similar to a commercial bank in order to be able to provide this service. So I think that the model that would be more reasonable, at least from our thinking, is the two-tier model where the distribution is done by intermediaries, by financial intermediaries, And if you read the ECB report that was issued in October 2020, they said two things. One thing is that the digital euro should be used as a means of payment, not as a store of value. So, because that's the risk that there is if it's a store of value, that maybe we have a deposit run, and that impacts the credit capability of a commercial bank. So it needs to be a mean of payment, not a store of value. And the second thing they said, very relevant, is that it should be distributed by financial intermediaries. Okay, so I think that in general, the solutions that are being developed or thought about in the retail space are in this model. No?
Yeah, and maybe also just a side note, I think also in the ECB report, they also mentioned that it would be possible to limit the amount of CBDC that the consumers could hold. So that would at least prevent it from being a store of value. Okay, we don't have much time left. We have 3 minutes left. So I would like to ask you about the last question, and that's, do you see a CBDC issuance anytime soon, both the wholesale or retail CBDC? I think we've discussed this earlier and a couple of years ago also, but do you see a CBDC anytime soon? We already have a couple of CBDCs around the world, but maybe in Europe, do you see a CBDC anytime soon?
So if I should start anytime soon, I don't think so in Europe. I think we will see that first in other places, but I would say maybe in 5 years we see something, but before would be tight. And just because, as also Francisco said, there are so many open issues, not just on the technical side, but on the governance side. Most likely you will also have to involve parliaments, change some laws, and that just takes time.
Yeah, totally agree with Thomas. So in the end, there is so much work to be done before launching a CBDC. It could have a huge impact on the financial system, on the monetary policy, on foreign countries' spillover effects. It's a huge change, no? So I think it's we need to be very calm and think things twice and identify very well the key risks and what are the mitigants. And that's will take time. And I mean, in Europe at least, we have 2 years for investigation. This investigation process has been launched now in November. So after that, after all that definition, which is mainly assessing impact, do the design on the different options, ensure that there is privacy, avoid risks, define the business model for everyone. All these things will take time, at least 2 years, and then from that, if the decision is made, they were saying that they need 3 years more for the implementation. That's why they say 5 years for this project. I don't know if they make the decision to go forward. We will have that 5 years. If they don't make the decision, maybe we don't have a CBDC and we will work with stable coins. Who knows? We will see in the following years. I foresee that it's easier to go for a wholesale one than a retail one, but time will say.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, it's really interesting. And obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on. Central banks are researching on this project. Commercial banks are researching on these projects, and we're trying to figure out what's up and down in this. But thank you so much, both of you, for participating in this panel discussion. And I, at least, think it was very, very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And also thank you to the audience for the questions. I'm sorry we couldn't run through them all.
So I'll just say
Daniel.
words and then I will let Alexander.
Thank you for the amazing discussion. I think it's a good idea to leave something for next time, right? Even though we cover a few things, I'm happy that we also managed to cover some stuff from the Project Jura, that it's quite new. It's new news. So thank you very much once again. I appreciate also the audience was active sending us questions, and I invite you all to join us for the next session on NFTs. Thank you.